Cheers to Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister who's currently doing more to advocate for Bitcoin and other decentralized currencies than anyone in the business. This is probably going to seem like out of left field, and maybe I should have coated my hat in tin foil for the night, but I wanted to just kind of plant this seed so that people who maybe aren't interested in this topic but will watch this like 10-minute video, maybe they'll think about this in the future when stuff like this starts coming around. First, we're going to talk about CBDC, or central bank digital currency, or like the Fed dollar. You know how when you have a kid that paints a picture of a person, you're like, that's a person. But it doesn't really look like a person, but because our brains work pretty well, we can get that that's a person. That's what I'm about to do when I'm explaining CBDCs, Fedcoin, and Bitcoin. Like, it's going to basically kind of be there, but it's going to be not perfect. So for anybody who's like a Bitcoin expert, or anybody who has a deep technical knowledge of what I'm talking about, just know that I'm trying to prime the pump for people. I'm trying to get people sort of interested so that they can go watch people who are considerably smarter than I am talking about this. But as more of a dum-dum, I'm still interested in this stuff, and I want to kind of explain it the way I know how, because I feel like it may be more relatable to my fellow dum-dums. So here we go. Right now, the money that we use, a dollar bill, has an identification number on it. You know, like in the movies, they'll talk about like, pay me in 20s in non-sequential bills. What they're talking about is that like ID number that's on a bill. I should have grabbed a bill. That would have been handy. Basically, what moving to a central bank digital currency, or a Fed dollar, I'll just call it a CBDC from now on for short. Moving to a CBDC basically would say, like, let's say I have $100 in my bank account. What I would have is $100 in my bank account, but each of those dollars would have this ID number associated with it. So those individual bills are now not just 100 $1 bills. It's 100 individual ID numbers that are in that account. And what would happen is, if you and I were to transact, let's say your name's Clay. Clay and I are going to transact, and I take one of those dollars that is the specific ID, and I pass it to Clay through some digital means. I presume that it would be going through our phones. There would be some sort of method. It would register at the central bank, or the Fed, wherever they decided to set up those servers, that I wanted to transact with Clay. They would say, yes, we verify that Brandon has 100 of these individual ID numbers in his account. We will agree to pass one of those to Clay. So that individual number, verified through the central bank, is now passed to Clay. So what can they track? They now know that the specific ID number of a dollar that I owned now went to Clay, because they know who I am, they know the ID of the bill, and they know who Clay is. See where we're going with this? At a certain point, I'm going to get there. But let's first talk about why this would be super good to start. And then we're going to kind of turn the ship, and you're going to see why it could also be bad. The great thing about this is, presumably the transactions will be super fast, and they'll be cheap, like cheaper than using Visa. Visa and MasterCard and all of these kind of third-party pay places, they charge a fee, which is why they make billions and billions of dollars every year charging these transaction fees. And presumably a central bank digital currency would lower those fees, or make them, potentially even make them zero. So that would be amazing. One thing that I've heard that I think would be fascinating is, each of those dollars has an ID number attached to it. So in theory, if someone was able to somehow steal my phone, or hack into my phone or something, and take those dollars for themselves, I could maybe call somebody at the Fed and say, hey, somebody stole 99 of my 100 CBDCs. And they would say, we do see where there was a transfer here. So what we're going to do is we're going to destroy the ability for those individual numbers to be further transferred from where they are now. So essentially, they're dead dollars. Then they could issue me new dollars, therefore replacing the dollars that are in the bank. Which, that would also be pretty amazing, because what they're not doing is, they're not just saying, oh, we're going to go get it from this person. They're just making it so that when that person tries to transact, those dollars are essentially dead, which I don't know if that's possible, but it sounds pretty cool. So as people start getting used to this thing of like, I wanted to buy a hot dog downtown, so the guy has a QR code that I take a picture of, and then it's transferred to him through an approval process of one click. Bam, $5 hot dog, just paid for that thing. As that becomes easier and easier, people will stop using cash as much, and cash will be destroyed by the Fed slowly over time, which it currently is being destroyed. They're currently continuing to take cash out of the market and destroy it. Sometimes they'll replace it with new dollars, and sometimes they won't replace it with new dollars. But slowly cash, presumably over, I don't know how many years, would be destroyed. So one medium of exchange that can still remain fairly anonymous would be extremely limited or destroyed. Let's say in the future, there is a leftist government that gets elected, and it's a blue Senate, it's a blue House, and it's a blue president, and they say, you know, we are concerned that gun stores are selling to minors, are not doing background checks correctly, are selling bump stocks, or selling little things that are still illegal federally, and we need to look into this. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a temporary hold on their ability to do transactions because we want to make sure that they're doing everything legally. Now, this sounds far-fetched. Right now, one of the reasons that I think it is a little far-fetched is because the channels they would have to go through to get to the banks, to get to the payment processors, and on down the line is difficult, and there would be, you know, cases that would be filed. It would instantly get muddied up in court. But if there is a central bank digital currency, none of that has to happen. What happens is the leftist government, I almost said Biden administration, that's crazy, just says, here's what we are going to do. They name the executive action, and the Fed turns off their ability to transact. And let's say it's only a week. Let's say it's only a week this time. But then the next time they do it, it's another week. Or let's say it's longer than a week. Let's say, for instance, I am a landlord, which I am. And let's say there's a global pandemic, which there was, and the government comes into my rental contract that I have signed based on Tennessee state law and the federal law, and they say, you are actually no longer allowed to evict these people because there's a pandemic. And I go, no, I signed an agreement with these people. And they say, listen, if you take $1 from your renters, because we can see your renters, we know who they are, and we've seen the money going into your account, we will not allow you to do business any further. We will stop your ability to do business. It is a snap of the fingers rather than having to go through the layers of protection that we have right now. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I'm saying that it has more of a potential to happen under something like a CBDC that is truly a single point of failure, like the central bank, where literally transactions are running from me through the central bank, where literally the Fed or the central bank holds a record of all of those transactions. They are the ones who have massive amounts of servers in their, their Washington, D.C. headquarters, where those transactions are going to be run through there. Essentially, they become the only bank that could exist. Again, this is a little maybe tinfoil hatty, maybe it's a little bit too far out, but I'm just kind of... Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, has just invoked the Emergency Act, which is similar in our country to martial law. And so what it does is it vastly expands the government's powers so that they can all of a sudden do a bunch of stuff that they couldn't before, like without warrants. And one of the main things that they have said they are going to do, Canada's Deputy Prime Minister, and I'm going to read, if your truck is being used in these illegal blockades, your corporate accounts will be frozen. The insurance on your vehicle will be suspended. They will not allow transfers into or out of these bank accounts. Because of the Emergency Act, no warrants needed. Banks will not be held accountable if they suspect that you were a part of one of these blockades and that people are funding. They will literally, even if the bank suspects, they can freeze your accounts. Think about how much easier that becomes if it's a federally held digital dollar. How much money has our Fed in the US printed in the last 2 years? I've read between 40% and 80% of every dollar that has ever existed in the history of the United States has been printed in the last 2 years. I can't verify the 80%, but it just sounds better and it fits my narrative, so we'll just go with 80%. So in theory, let's say everybody is on this central bank digital currency thing. I know I said I was going to just say CBDC, but for some reason it's not rolling off the tongue as easy as I was hoping. Everybody is involved in the CBDC thing, and the Fed says, we need to put more money in this economy. We need to get more money in this thing. We need to get this thing going. All they're doing is just printing more code, printing more code, printing more code, flooding the economy with dollars, doing exactly what they're doing now, except it just becomes that much easier for them to create inflation, to cause the inflation that we are currently seeing, this massively irresponsible tax on people that are poor. People without assets are getting pounded by inflation right now, and it could potentially get worse. A CBDC makes it that much easier for them to continue to jack inflation. What would be even scarier, again, I'm just going to continue to ratchet up. Let's say everybody is storing the majority of their dollars on the central digital, on the CBDC network, and they decide that they need money to pay for stuff. And so what they say is, at first, if you've got an account balance of over $200,000, we're actually going to need 1% of that. We're going to just take 1% of that every year. It's a new tax that we're doing. It's basically like an account balance tax to just make sure that we're getting our piece. And you know that it's going to start with people who make, everyone who makes over $400,000 a year. And then it's going to chunk down until everybody, every month, is having something taken out of their account. Again, imagine I'm wearing my tinfoil hat because this is getting a little rowdy, but it's possible. It could happen. So how do we combat this? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen, or that if it does happen, that we don't necessarily completely fall prey to a CBDC coming to power? You have to make sure that you're keeping other forms of currency, of things that can be traded back and forth. I want to advocate for Bitcoin, and I want to say that Bitcoin is the answer to all of this, but the truth is I don't know enough about it to say that it is. I've watched tons of stuff on it. I've listened to tons of stuff on it. The truth is I don't know if Bitcoin is the answer. I hope that something like it is the answer. Bitcoin is software. It's not a tangible thing. There's no actual coin that you're handing people. It's software. It's a limited program where basically inside of this limited program there are 21 million of these coins that have been produced, 21 million of these things, that each one of them is divisible by 100 million. So if you imagine a dollar is divisible by 100 pennies, that's basically the equivalent. So one Bitcoin can be broken down into 100 million pieces. You could, in theory, buy small items with 1/100 millionth of this Bitcoin. I've talked a lot about the centralization of the central bank digital currency, how the transactions are flowing through this one hub, which is the central bank or the Fed or whatever agency they put in place. But it would be, in theory, controlled by these people. Bitcoin is controlled by a network of computers that are spread all around the globe. And the simplest way for me to explain it, and it's not exactly right, but it's close. Imagine everyone has the exact same Excel spreadsheet, and it's connected to the internet on your computer. And when I do a transaction with Clay, I transact, it essentially registers with every single one of those Excel spreadsheets all across the world. Every one of those computers goes, yes, we see that Brandon had his $1, he transferred it to Clay, and the Excel spreadsheet is updated. If you're a Bitcoin person, you hate what I just did, and I apologize, but that's basically what it is. There is not one computer that everything is going through. Okay, there are many, there are thousands and thousands and probably millions of computers that are on this network, that are involved in the network, that are essentially keeping account of these transactions. I could go deeper into this part of it, but I don't think it's necessary for what we're talking about. Because it's a program and it's code, there will only ever be 21 million of these things. That's it. So there is no central bank that can create more of these things. It was pre-programmed and it has never been changed. I could overcomplicate this and try to explain why there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin. And I'm not going to say, like, trust me, there's only going to be this. There's a program that's written that has only 21 million of these Bitcoin in there, and those are the parameters. If something else is created, that's not Bitcoin, it's something else. So, like, pink coin or whatever the heck, all these other like cryptocurrencies, it's not Bitcoin, it's a different thing. It's like being like, Chevy makes trucks. Well, what about this Raptor over here? And you're like, no, that's a Ford. Yes, it's a truck, but it's a different thing. It's a truck. So I get how you could draw the parallels, but if Chevy's only making 1,000 of this one Chevy truck, you can't make another one of those by making a Ford Raptor. It's just not the same thing. So the power of this decentralization, again, the transactions being verified throughout the entire world. One computer can go off the network. The support of those existing computers is still going to basically be keeping up with all those transactions. There's been times where entire countries have basically pushed their computers offline or made them illegal to be used in those countries. They have said, we do not want these computers verifying these transactions. And I'm sure there's still people that are, doing stuff illegally at certain points, illegally. But what ends up happening is the rest of the network is still carrying and basically doing these transactions. So the decentralization of the verification of the transactions, that's where the power is. The power is the fact that no one can turn them off. No one can turn them off. No one person. No one agency, no one country. 2 years ago, I was in the Dominican Republic and I was trying to close a real estate deal. And I called my bank and I said, I need you guys to wire the money for this closing because this seller was able to get everything together, but they are demanding that we close tomorrow or they're going to walk away from this deal. And the banker said, I'm sorry, you're not in the United States of America and you're not operating between the hours of 9 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We can't do anything for you. We can't actually do this transaction. The year after that, I was back in the Dominican for that same conference, and my brother-in-law had basically fronted some money for a trip that we had done previously, and I wanted to pay him back. So I went into my app, I transferred him the money, and 5 minutes later, he looked on his phone, and he had the money. And I could have transferred $100,000 in Bitcoin if I had it. So that's another thing that's super powerful about this and relates back to Canada. I can't simply transfer money up to Canada into Canadian accounts, but because this Bitcoin network is worldwide and no governments control it, I can transfer it cross-border. The Canadians are trying to shut it down, and I have no idea how they're going to do it, and maybe they can. I don't know. Again, I'm not that technical, and I don't know that Bitcoin is the answer, but I know that some sort of decentralized currency or decentralized digital assets that are controlled by the people and not by the government is the only way we maintain freedom. Because the more centralized things become, inevitably the more the power focuses, and then you see somebody like Trudeau get in office who appears to be somebody who is level-headed and then turns out to be literally just a fascist. And it can happen on the left and it can happen on the right. And it's simply not worth the risk. So you should probably look into this stuff more. I'm not advocating for Bitcoin. What I'm advocating for is a system that is similar to Bitcoin. And maybe it's Bitcoin. I don't know yet. I'm still looking into it, and I think you guys should too. Cheers to Trudeau. Again, thank you for advocating so strongly for Bitcoin. I cannot believe what you are doing to your people right now. Thanks for watching. I'm Brandon McDonald.